Tea Leaves is where we slow the moment down. Not to speculate, not to accuse, but to read how power is actually moving beneath the surface. And right now, the tea leaves are telling us something familiar. We are watching Black culture circulate through political spaces again, not as policy, not as protection, not as partnership, but as credential. When trust is low, proximity becomes the strategy. When credibility is thin, culture is borrowed. And this election cycle, Black athletes and artists are not being elevated. They are being circulated. Their images, their names, their aesthetics are doing work that policy refuses to do. This is not ideology. It's not about endorsement. And it's not even about belief. It's about extraction. Because when Black culture shows up everywhere, but Black communities don't show up in the legislation, budgets, or protection, that's not inclusion, that's usage. Tonight we're reading the tea leaves on how Black influence is being mobilized, monetized, and managed without ever being handed real power in return. Let's talk about how this works. Here's the first thing we need to get clear. Power is not moving to Black culture. Power is moving through it, temporarily. That distinction matters. What we're seeing is not coalition building, it's cultural leasing. Black athletes like Angel Reese, Black sport figures like Shedeur Sanders, high visibility artists with deep cultural memory. None of these figures are being positioned as political architects. They're being positioned as signals. Signals to youth voters, signals to skeptical moderates, signals to donors who want reach without reform. Their presence creates an illusion of alignment without requiring the work of accountability. And here's the quiet part. The risk is not shared equally. The institutions gain legitimacy, the campaigns gain optics, the algorithms apply the image. Meanwhile, the cultural figures, especially Black athletes, absorb the backlash, the scrutiny, the misinterpretation, and the reputational cost. That's asymmetric. This isn't new, but it is more refined because in the media environment driven by clips and vibes, symbolism travels faster than policy. So tonight we're not asking who supports whom. We're asking who benefits first, who is protected last, and why does Black visibility keep increasing while Black leverage stays flat? To understand this moment, we have to break it down, not by personalities, but by function. 5 movements, 5 readings, starting with how culture itself has become a political credential. Black culture is not being courted here as a constituency. It's being deployed as evidence. Evidence of relatability, evidence of relevance, evidence that a political movement can still touch the cultural center of gravity without earning trust or delivering policy. That distinction matters because constituencies negotiate. Credentials are simply displayed. Cultural proximity is often mistaken for political alignment, but they are not the same thing. Standing near Black culture, amplifying Black voices, or circulating Black imagery does not automatically translate into shared interests or shared outcomes. In fact, proximity is often used precisely because alignment is missing. When policy records are thin or contested, symbolism becomes the substitute. Election cycles intensify this behavior. The closer power gets to the ballot box, the more it leans on high visibility symbols to travel quickly through media ecosystems. Athletes with massive youth reach. Artists whose names trigger nostalgia and emotional memory. These figures function as accelerants, not because of what they advocate, but because of what they signal at a glance. The signal is not ideological, it's cultural reassurance. It tells undecided audiences this space can't be hostile if this is present. That's the work the image is doing. It softens edges. It disrupts criticism. It reframes conversation before they ever reach substance. And critically, it does all of this without requiring a single policy concession. This is why optics routinely outrun commitment. Images circulate instantly. Accountability takes time. Cultural symbols can be monetized without negotiation, without contract, and without follow-through. Meanwhile, the long-term cost, backlash, misinterpretation, reputational strain, they tend to land on the cultural figures themselves, not the institutions barring their visibility. So the tea leaves here are clear. When a political movement lacks trust, it borrows aesthetic. The question that we should always follow is not who showed up in the photo, but who walked away with leverage. Who benefits immediately from the image, and who is left carrying the cost long after the election cycle moves on. The moment isn't about why they choose anything. It's about why they were chosen. Angel Reese and Shedeur Sanders represent a special kind of black visibility that power consistently finds useful. Confident without being explicitly confrontational. Dominant without centering protest. And culturally legible across platforms without needing translation. They embody modern black confidence, not the politics of refusal, but the politics of presence. They don't have to issue a statement or lead movements for their images to carry meaning. Their very visibility communicates success, self-assurance, and cultural fluency in spaces that political struggles to access organically, especially among younger audiences. The brands also share three key traits. They are unapologetic, highly visible, and algorithmically unavoidable. You don't have to seek them out to encounter them. Highlights travel, clips circulate, commentary follows. In a media economy driven by attention, that kind of saturation is more valuable than ideological clarity. It creates reach without resistance. Crucially, both figures sit at the intersection of sports, youth culture, and broader identity politics, including race, gender, and generational change. That intersection multiplies their symbolic utility. They speak to audiences politics wants to reach but cannot easily persuade through traditional messaging. Their presence alone reframes the room. And this is the key tea leaf. This isn't about what they say. It's about what they signal. The signal is cultural modernity. The signal is relevance. The signal is implied bridge between power and a demographic that otherwise remains skeptical or disengaged. Which is why it's important to say this clearly. They may not be participants, they are symbols being circulated. Power often moves around black athletes, not through them, extracting legitimacy from their presence while insulating decision-making from their influence. That asymmetry is not accidental, it's actually by design. When political movements reach for high visibility hip-hop artists, they are not chasing ideology, they're chasing familiarity. Nostalgia carries emotional memory. It reminds audiences of who they are, not what policies are being proposed. That familiarity creates comfort, and comfort lowers defenses in ways arguments never could. Nostalgia also carries something more useful, perceived cultural forgiveness. It suggests that if this voice is present, then the space can't be hostile, or at least not hostile enough to interrogate. The artist becomes a cultural buffer, absorbing skepticism before it reaches the political core. This is how cultural movements are often used to soften hard policy edges. Music, memory, and legacy work as emotional soothing agents. They redirect attention from material outcomes to symbolic presence. In that shift, difficult questions about voting rights, economic equity, or state power quietly loosens oxygen. The tea leaves here are blunt. Nostalgia is safer than justice and cheaper than reform. This is a new outreach. It's selective resurrection. Artists are not policy brokers, but their presence implies coalition. An implication in an election cycle often does the work that containment never could. The clearest harm in this moment is not confusion, it's imbalance. Black culture is being activated without any accompanying policy guarantee. Visibility is abundant. Protection is not. And without protection, visibility becomes a liability rather than a resource. There is no meaningful transfer of power happening alongside the imagery. No durable commitments to voting protections. no sustained economic investment, no expanded educational or housing guarantees tied to the community supplying the cultural capital. What's being exchanged is attention, not leverage, and attention expires the moment the cycle moves on. This is the structure of extraction. Cultural figures create legitimacy, soften perception, and widen reach. Institutions receive credibility and installation from critique. But when backlash follows from fans, media, or the public, it doesn't land on the campaigns or political organization. It lands on the athlete or artist whose image was circulated without control. That asymmetry is deliberate. Institutions are designed to absorb power and deflect risk. Cultural figures are not. They are left to navigate reputational fallout, online harassment, and long-term brand consequences with little institutional protection. Power consolidates upward. Accountability trickles downward. The tea leaves are unmistaken here. If the culture is visible but the community isn't protected, it's extraction. The presence of Black culture is being treated as a substitute for structural change rather than a demand for it. This dynamic is especially dangerous to women in sports. Black women athletes are hyper-visible, underprotected, and endlessly useful as symbols of progress, while remaining structurally ignored when it comes to pay equity, media framing, health protection, and political advocacy. Their bodies, images, and narratives are mobilized far more often than their interests are defended. The purpose of reading the tea leaves isn't outrage, it's recognition. Once you understand the pattern, the play loses its power. These moments aren't random and they aren't new. They follow a logic that becomes visible once you stop focusing on personality and start tracking sensitive. The first question is always, who gains legitimacy first? If credibility flows immediately to institutions or campaigns, while communities are promised results later, the exchange is already uneven. Power that arrives instantly but delivers slowly is rarely meant to deliver at all. Second, what policy moves follow the photo op? Images are easy, statements are cheap. Material change leaves a paper trail. If a cultural movement is not followed by concrete legislative action, budgetary shifts, or enforcement protections, then the moment was the point, not the beginning of anything. Third, who gets silence protection, and who gets scapegoated? Institutions are often shielded from consequences, while cultural figures absorb public backlash. When controversy emerges, pay attention to who is defended and who is left to explain themselves alone. That imbalance reveals where power actually sits. Finally, does cultural presence translate into material change? If Black culture is everywhere where Black communities remain politically exposed, economically vulnerable, and structurally ignored, then presence has been mistaken for influence, intentionally. So the final tea leaves take is simple. Black culture is not a campaign tool. It's a constituency. And constituencies deserve receipt, not aesthetic. If the culture is being courted, the community should be protected on paper, in policy, and beyond the election cycle. Before we close, let's be clear about what this episode was and what it wasn't. This wasn't about telling you who to support or what to believe. This was about sharpening your vision, because once you see how power moves, it becomes much harder to be distracted by how it performs. In moments like this, the most important skill isn't loyalty, it's literacy. Cultural literacy, political literacy, media literacy. When image moves faster than policy, discernment becomes a form of protection. Don't just watch who shows up. Watch who benefits, who is protected, and who is left carrying the weight after the cameras move on. This is Controlling Interest, PoliSports Tea Leaves with your host, Political Liv. Where we don't react to the move, we read the play behind it. Where visibility doesn't confuse us and proximity doesn't persuade us. If Black culture is in the room, we're asking where the receipts are, not admiring the decor. Because remember, when Black culture shows up but Black policy doesn't, you're not being included, you're being used. If this episode helped you to see the board more clearly, make sure you subscribe, like, and share it with someone who still thinks optics are outcomes. Drop a comment. Tell us what patterns you're noticing and what tea leaves you're reading. Stay sharp, stay curious, and we'll see you next time on Controlling Interest, PoliSports Tea Leaves, where reading the play is the only thing that matters.